Hey, what's up, studs? Ryan here, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look back at every LEGO Star Wars 2023 set and ranking them in order from worst to first to find out what set was the best. Now, there's a few things I won't be ranking, including the foil packs and foil minifigures. There's some nice mini builds and nice figures available in magazines over in Europe, but these just aren't available in the US at this point. Still don't know why. The X-Wing polybag this year looked really good and continued the trend of each year's LEGO Star Wars polybag build matching up with a bigger build in the same year. We also saw a couple of amazing brickhead sets with the Tusken Raider and the Heroes of Endor pack. And finally, before getting into the full rankings, we saw a very weird set that was only given to Lucasfilm employees. So it's a little polybag essentially of the Yoda fountain statue outside of Skywalker Ranch. That's a really cool build to be able to give employees. It's very expensive on eBay at this point, and for some reason, LEGO chose to give him the worst legs you could give a LEGO Yoda. It looks really bad. Getting into the full rankings at number 30 with what, in my opinion, is the worst set of 2023. Hear me out, the 332nd Battle Pack. And I have a few distinct reasons as to why this is the worst set of 2023 for me. First up, it's a named character in a battle pack. That to me is just a no-go. We have minifigure character packs. You can make micro fighters for characters like this, but I firmly believe battle packs shouldn't be a mixture of named and non-named characters. If you want to do that like the Bounty Hunter battle pack, that's fine. Now, many people defend this by saying, well, Ryan, the Captain Vaughn, looks very similar to the other 332nd troopers in the set. In fact, there is only one difference between the Vaughn and the other troopers outside of the visor, which you can just take off. But there's a small print on his chest that is the little rank insignia. Outside of that, the characters are exactly the same, and they, I agree, do look very similar. However, I'm not looking for similarities, I'm looking for the character to be accurate to its depiction. Even though I don't think Vaughn should be in this set, I also think if you're going to make Vaughn exist, it should be a good version of Vaughn. And this is not a good version of Vaughn. This is the laziest, cheapest thing they could have done. They didn't make the abdomen light gray. They were able to do this on Commander Cody in the summer of 2022. Don't know why they couldn't do it here. LEGO also couldn't be bothered to update the helmet print with that little red stripe on the bottom chin area. Now, Vaughn in and of himself doesn't make this the worst set of the year. I also think the other three characters in this set are just worse representations of 332nd troopers than we saw just 3 years prior. Now, what I do like about this set is the little swamp speeder build. It's very compact, but it's got a lot of small details there and some nice functionality for its size, and of course, just being a little battle pack build. The next three sets here are mechs, and I had a really hard time placing these, but ended up just kind of throwing them down here because I really didn't know, like, are any of these actually better than microfighters? Probably not. I'd rather have a microfighter than a mech at the end of the day, but these three sets actually do deliver very high quality minifigures, which I think is clearly, for many collectors, their redeeming quality. I think the Stormtrooper is fantastic. I think it looks very good. I think the color scheme of the mech matches the Stormtrooper nicely, and you can pretty much say that about Darth Vader and Boba Fett as well in that order. I do think the Boba Fett is the best of the three, just given that it's got a really unique color scheme with the sand blue, the dark green, the yellow, a little bit of dark red in there. It's just a really nice mixture, and it also has a really cool play feature where you can actually shoot the missile out of Boba Fett's backpack behind him, so I love that. And the Boba Fett figure in there is UCS quality. I mean, it's fantastic. He's just missing the cape, and I think this one has a pretty good argument to be made that it could go much higher on the list. However, I think because of the missing cape, it's just not as good as it could have been, and so I'm leaving it down here. Mechs for 2023 definitely felt like a weird experiment for LEGO Star Wars, and all three of these characters could have easily fit into a $15 minifig pack. I know a lot of people champion these sets as being cheap ways to get minifigures, but I'm offering a cheaper alternative where all three would be $15 if LEGO Star Wars had continued the thing that they started in 2022 but didn't release any more of this year. At number 26, we have one of the funkiest and flattest sets of 2023 with the buildable Chewbacca. I think it was a pretty fair value at $200. It's a pretty chunky build, very large, very sizable, definitely feels like it's worth the money when you're done building it. I think it has some very obvious highlights like the bandolier and his bowcaster. I think it has a pretty obvious low light in the face. It's just a little bit creepy looking. I think LEGO has kind of failed to make the faces look as good as I think many people would want them to look on these characters, and ultimately they end up just looking a bit funny, a bit weird to people, and it just becomes a bit of a talking point whenever they release characters with faces like this. But regardless, I think overall the fur on this guy looks very good. I love the pose that he's in and the stand that he's on, and of course you have that nice Chewbacca minifigure and the Chewbacca display plaque. So overall, I think this was a nice addition to the buildable character lineup. lineup, although like I could live without it. Moving on to number 25, we have the Microfighter Mandalorian N1 Starfighter. This was the first Microfighter to ever include more than one character, and it's also the first Microfighter to cost more than $10, seeing a price jump from $10 to $16. Frankly absurd, and this would be much higher on the list if it didn't have such an absurd price at $16. My gripe with this set is with its price and frankly nothing else. It is otherwise fantastic, and if you were able to find it or can find it in the future on sale for $13 or less, I think you found yourself in a much fairer price bracket, but overall the quality of the product here is really, really good. It's just the price that I have a problem with. Now moving on, something that wasn't overpriced, the $10 Microfighter Boba Fett Slave 1, and looking at this again, it is a bit blocky looking, and honestly the N1 Starfighter looks better, but again I can't rationalize the $16 price tag on the other one, you know what I mean? The build is worse and the included figure is worse because the helmet isn't the matching green that it is supposed to be, therefore it is far less accurate than what we see with the Mandalorian and Beskar armor. Therefore this is now the 25th best set of 2023, and I'm moving the Mando's N1 Starfighter up to 24. We can move on from the Microfighters. At number 23, the first ever LEGO Star Wars Jedi Temple. Unfortunately, the Tennu Jedi Temple from Young Jedi Adventures, not the Jedi Temple many people may have wanted out of a LEGO Star Wars set. This set included a brand new Yoda minifigure that was unlike any of the ones that we have seen before. I love the incredibly unique look that they gave to him, along with a couple other of the Jedi from the temple. It has tons of fun little play features included with a speeder bike, a little rock that you can force lift, you can knock over a Jedi on top of the boxes, and the inside of the temple was decked out. Overall, for $40, I think many people found this to be pricey, but that is usually the case with these younger 4+ sets for LEGO Star Wars, so it seems a bit tough to gauge to me, but overall I think this is a quality product for the 4-year-olds it's going for. Moving on, we have the 2023 Advent Calendar. I think this set has 2 bad things and 22 good things. The Leia in this set I don't think is very high quality. I'll go deeper on that when we get to the Endor speeder bike set later, and then we have the 212th Trooper included in this set again, and it still doesn't look like the picture that they included. The helmet print is still way worse than what they advertise, but the builds included in this set are phenomenal. We have a STAP, we have that clone command station, a Hellfire droid, an AAT, a clone turbo tank are some of the highlights for me, certainly. I love the included Omega. She's a great figure returning from the Justifier in 2022. We have a Holiday Ewok and Holiday Emperor Palpatine, and to go with them, of course, we have Palpatine's chair and an Ewok glider, and then I also really love the Reindeer Gonk droid. I think that is definitely the top highlight of this set to me, as something that's just fun and creative and special for this holiday advent calendar. So pretty good advent calendar for 2023. Next up, we have the Pirate Snub Fighter. I think it frankly costs $5 too much at $35. However, the build for this set is very, very good, very accurate, and very playable, very swooshable. It had a couple of stud shooters on the front. You could easily fit a pilot inside of it, and you had a little extra crate with some thermal detonators inside. The 2 minifigures, Vaughn and the Snub Fighter pilot, are very nice looking. However, I believe this Snub Fighter pilot was never shown in The Mandalorian Season 3. They just ended up reusing the Vaughn face. That can, of course, be chalked up to the idea that they would be using concept art to create a set like this, but ultimately that yellow minifig pilot just doesn't exist, so I don't think he's a great character inclusion. It's a really decent set overall. It just needed to be $5 cheaper or include another minifig or 2. Next up, at number 20, we're getting down there, we have the Spider Tank from The Mandalorian Season 3, and this one really suffered from concept art. It was not supposed to just be gray. It definitely was supposed to have more of a copper color from the show. And when it came to the Spider Tank's existence in the show, there was a lot of action going on around it that really should have been included in the set. Again, suffers from having been made based on concept art instead of LEGO waiting for the show to come out and then making the set, because then I think it would have been much better. It should have included a pram for Grogu as he uses it to escape the situation with the Spider Tank. It also should have included the General Grievous-like droid that uses the Spider Tank to roam the caves. And lastly, it should have included the little area that it trapped the Mandalorian within to suck out all of his blood or whatever it was doing. So definitely a few key aspects missing from the set that would have just made it much better. I think the highlights here are definitely the figures. The Mandalorian and Grogu are fantastic offerings, as well as the new Bo Katan for this set was just phenomenal with that extra bit of arm printing and that very nice light blue on her. I think that goes a long way. And then they also gave her a new hairpiece in this set. That's something I almost forgot about. That made this character look way better. The one that they included in the 2021 Mandalorian Starfighter from the Clone Wars looked awful. It made her look bad with the hair on, but they went and improved it here. So mad props for that. Just unfortunately, because the set is missing so many obvious things that should have been there, it's hard to rate it higher. At number 19, we have the Coruscant Guard gunship. After 10 years of waiting, this is the Republic gunship that LEGO came out with. And first and foremost, I want to say that I really love the idea that LEGO did a non-standard gunship. There are people that certainly wish it was a standard one, and I can sympathize with that. However, doing something outside the box is incredibly fun here. This is a really cool color scheme for a Republic gunship. It looks really dope in this color scheme. That dark red taking over with the hints of white instead just looks really, really good in my eyes. Now, unfortunately, this model suffers from a massive downsize compared to its predecessors, and so it is much smaller, much more compact, and you lose quite a few things in doing that. First off, it just feels a bit chubby. It's definitely missing a middle section there. It's just not long enough. What's left of the compartment under the cockpits is also just completely unused. They don't add in any extra play functionality there, and as you move further back into the troop bay, it's very tight. It's very hard to put figures in there. You'll knock them down from time to time. There's a very small area where you can even fit your hand in there to place figures down, partially because it's downsized, but also because they chose to make it one singular door when it should be two doors that split down the middle and go opposite ways, which would give you more space to put your hand into that troop area and be able to place troops down and move them around in there when needed. So I think that's two downsides there, where it's one, less accurate, which obviously I find to be important, and two, it makes it just more difficult to get your hand in places where it needs to go. Now, maybe the most controversial thing they did on this gunship was stick some stud shooters on the end of the wings when it just shouldn't look anything like that. I do think it's a great play function. It's very good for kids. However, in the same breath, I just don't think it looks very good, so it's definitely got a big downside there. Lastly, for the build though, it's very sturdy. It does have a carrying handle, but honestly, with as strong as they made it, you don't even need it. You can really pick this thing up anywhere on the build, from the wing to the doors, and squeeze them, and nothing really breaks on this set. And so I do really appreciate the strength and obviously the color scheme this build has, but it obviously has shortcomings in other areas. Now, the minifigs are quite interesting. The Padme is of an outfit that's from seasons before this episode happened, I think. Doesn't quite make a lot of sense to me when we had an opportunity to get a unique variant of Padme that we will probably otherwise never be able to have. We have had Padme in this outfit before, albeit it was in 2012, but we had never seen Padme with her Coruscant Guard gunship outfit. So I find it quite disappointing to get that inaccurate of a Padme for this set, not to mention the cheap and lazy Jyn Erso face print. I believe the Palpatine is far and away the best figure in this set. I love him. I think it's a great new version of him, and they knocked it out of the park. And then when it comes to our clone troopers, we unfortunately only get 3. It's just not enough for a $140 clone set, in my opinion. I think we should get 5 plus the 2 other characters or 3 other characters. I mean, it's $140. Why are we not getting more figures? Battle packs get 4 figures, $140 set gets 5. Something ain't adding up there to me. Anyway, the Fox is an abomination. He is probably the worst LEGO Star Wars clone trooper ever. He quite literally has a pink chest print, even though in every advertisement you'll see of the set, it looks white. He also has the printed waist cape, which looks far worse than the fabric waist capes of years past. And back to that chest print, the minifigure designer couldn't even color in the template of the clone trooper correctly and do the part underneath the breastplate as red. It's supposed to be red. It's really simple. I just don't understand how you can mess up a clone trooper so badly. Fox is awful. It'd be better that he didn't exist, quite frankly. It's that bad. Now, the shock troopers maybe end up in a little bit of a better position, as in my opinion, they only have one issue, being the helmet holes. The Yoda Starfighter, when I reviewed it, really surprised me for how good of a build it was and how much of an improvement it was over the somewhat recent 2017 version of this set. Unfortunately, for $35, it felt like it was a bit too much money, and if it had a third figure, I don't think I would feel the same way. I think this set absolutely should have had Darth Bane. If we looked at last year in 2022, they had Obi-Wan Starfighter, and it included a third minifigure with the Kaminoan. Everything else about this set is really good. You get the R2-D2 with back printing, you get a nice Clone Wars Yoda figure, and the Starfighter build is actually very, very good. It's very compact, but very strong. It's got some decent sticker detailing, a nice area for R2-D2 in the rear, and the highlight of this one is the printed cockpit piece that is actually actually accurate to Yoda's starfighter, unlike the one they used in 2017 that was just a reused TIE fighter cockpit piece. So big improvement there. And overall, I think this set is very good. It just was missing that third figure. At number 17, after waiting what seemed like forever, we finally got a big Yavin 4 base build in 2023. And just from reading comments, I saw a lot of people disappointed that the build basically looked like a 4+ or a junior set. And I think it did suffer in going for the 8+ age rating. It definitely could have been a more detailed, better looking build if it was like a 10+ or 11 or 12+ set. And given it's $170, I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to have expected. But regardless, I still think it's a pretty killer playset as it recreates quite a few scenes from Star Wars. You have multiple different rooms and play areas represented. I love the technician cart included. I also really like the kind of MIDI scale Y-wing that they included. I think that's a really fun model. Its real big detractor is the 2 spring-loaded shooters that they put on top of it. And while the tree build left a bit to be desired, I still think the crow's nest is very cool for this set. Now, finally, the 12 minifigs included here are a big highlight. I talked a minute ago about how 5 figures for $140 seemed bad, because it was. Because 12 figures is amazing for $170. The Luke, Han, and Leia are highlights for me, with the Luke and Han having these new removable medallions so that you can recreate the ceremony from A New Hope, and you have enough figures to go ahead and fill out each section, and if kids are using this as a playset, play with each section accordingly. At 16, we have one of the weirder LEGO Star Wars sets ever released in the holiday diorama. I will say it's a pretty good value though, with 282 pieces for $30 and 5 characters, 3 full-fledged minifigures though. You have BB-8 and a Porg as kind of your not really minifigures but still characters figures. And then we had Rey and Finn with specific holiday outfits, and then finally Chewbacca taking a bite out of that chicken, or maybe it's a Porg there on the dinner table. But overall, this is kind of the Millennium Falcon interior with a nice holiday twist. They had the Christmas tree build, like I mentioned, a very nice dinner table with some different food items, a string of colorful lights going across the top, and then in the leisure area, you actually had the Jedi sacred text, which I don't see another set that they would have feasibly released that would have included the sacred text, so I think it's really cool to actually have it in this set. I think the biggest downside to this one, though, is Rey not getting a yellow lightsaber. She has a yellow lightsaber. Give her a yellow lightsaber. I don't know. Like, pretty simple. At number 15, maybe overpriced at $80, but the Endor speeder bike chase diorama, I think, is a fantastic build. I think it looks great. It flows super well with the speeder bikes kind of flying between the trees. I liked this one so much that I went out and bought like 7 of them and combined them together for a video, which was pretty fun. This, of course, included the 40th anniversary return of the Jedi brick. It's got one of those quote plates and the printed LEGO Star Wars plate. I think the tree design, as well as the design for some of the shrubbery on the ground here, is very, very good. But I think all of that is overshadowed by how great the speeder bike design is here. These speeder bike designs really are unlike anything that we had ever seen before. It's something very, very fresh, and at that, very accurate to what we saw in Return of the Jedi. So I did really appreciate that. Also, gotta say, the Scout Trooper continues to be one of the best figures that LEGO Star Wars puts out on a consistent basis. It's just very, very good. But what's not very, very good in this set, unfortunately, is the Endor Leia figure. She sees a bit of a downgrade from her last appearance in 2015, where she had a very nice cloth piece that looked really, really good and everyone kind of liked. Now in this set, they went and printed it, but possibly the worst offense on this figure are the legs. They have perfectly serviceable dual molded legs that would perfectly represent what we see with Princess Leia in Return of the Jedi here, but they just opted not to use them for no particular reason. I just think it's insane to release a figure that looks like that and then in your instruction manual boast about how you're chasing the details on the minifigures specifically. Like, the irony. Moving on, number 14, the UCS X-Wing. I originally had this one much lower on the list, and then I kept staring at it, and I was like, there's no particular reason why it's this low on the list, so I ended up bumping it up quite a bit here to 14, and it's a really good UCS model. I think there are certain aspects that I enjoyed more about the 2013 UCS X-Wing, but here 10 years later, I think it's hard to argue that this X-Wing isn't an upgrade. I think one of the biggest aspects of that for me is the printed windscreen piece. The 2013 set, they used a sticker for that particular piece, and that's a bit of a problem. If you mess it up, it's really, really hard, if not impossible, to fix without without it leaving some sort of residue behind, and that just completely ruins the look of your windscreen on a $200, and in this case, $240 UCS set forever. I think that's unacceptable. And so seeing them go and fix that here was fantastic. They also included a beautiful Luke Skywalker pilot minifigure with dual molded legs, just great all around, other than like for some reason they didn't print the side of his helmet, which they can do, but just left details off of that. So yeah, don't really know why they didn't go the extra mile there. They certainly should have. But the final area that they did go the extra mile in, maybe more ways than one, was the display card on this set. This was the first UCS set to have a printed display plaque. That was awesome. Like, we have been asking for that for years, and to see them finally deliver was amazing. I think it is far better than the stickers that we had. However, when they print it, you're able to see the mold mark in the middle of the 8x16 plates, and LEGO tried to Photoshop this on their product. Well, they didn't try. They did Photoshop this on their product images, and I caught that. I think it'd be great if they went and changed the mold so that the mold mark is on possibly the back of the plate. But as it stands, it's one of two very, very minor blemishes on this otherwise very good UCS X-Wing for 2023. At number 13, we have the Princess Leia Boushh helmet from Return of the Jedi. I quite liked the look of this thing, although I thought the green stripe on top of the helmet was a bit too bright looking compared to what I could see in the movie. But overall, I think this was a very accurate depiction of the Princess Leia Boushh helmet, and something that I think is a fun addition and a very unique one at that to the helmet collection, as it's just way different looking than pretty much every other LEGO Star Wars helmet set that we have ever gotten, and very likely if they end up making more in any future years. As of now, the helmet line is done for 2024 and beyond, but that doesn't mean it can't come back. At number 12, we have another set that I moved up quite considerably on the list after looking at it for a while, and that's the 501st Clone Troopers Battle Pack, because it only has one bad Clone Trooper and 3 good Clone Troopers. Outside of that, I think it's a fantastic build with 3 other quality Clone Troopers and a quality Battle Pack build with the kind of micro-sized AV7 cannon that has the spring-loaded shooter built inside of it. The 2 heavy troopers were great, as well as the specialist trooper, who included the brand new macro binoculars. I will always wish they had added a bit of printing detail to the macro binoculars, as they do look a bit plain, but that is kind of the norm for these helmet accessories on Clone Troopers. None of them have printing detail. Doesn't mean I didn't want it. Anyway, circling back to that Clone Trooper officer, there's a couple reasons it's bad. It has the printed waist cape. They should have just used a cloth one. That would look much better here. And then the antenna placement. The antennas on this guy sit way too high, and on all of the box art and product renders, they rendered the antenna to actually be in the proper place. So it actually looks kind of decent and doesn't sit in this really funny high position, although you can still see the weird empty hole above where they have placed it on the box. You can see how it should look, right? And so this obviously brought quite a bit of controversy, and quite oddly, they made a statement about this, and they did it again 10 months later. The May 4th promo for 2023 comes in at number 11 with this kind of mini or midi scale Death Star, and I think this is a fantastic little build. Its biggest downside as far as the build goes is the 4-color laser. It uses 4 different green colors, and that is a bit weird looking. I do wish they could have used all one color of translucent green, but they used like a grass stock piece and a stud and a cone and a lightsaber blade, and they just all end up being different colors, which looks a little bit awkward, more so in real life than maybe in the renders. But for its size, the build is frankly incredible, and it even included a little Easter egg inside of the Emperor's throne room with little studs to represent each of the characters. Stuff like that just takes sets like this to another level. What would have taken it to like a top level, like maybe top 5 of the year level, is a minifigure. It just needed a figure. We've seen micro builds like this come with figures in the past, with Harry Potter's Diagon Alley or the Avengers Tower promo. I couldn't possibly answer why this set doesn't have a figure, but it doesn't, and that is unfortunate. Moving on though, cracking our top 10 is the Captain Rex helmet, and this thing is beautiful. I do think the mouth is a bit small. I think that was my main complaint in the review, and I stand by that. It just is a bit small compared to the source material, but otherwise, the Captain Rex helmet is a dream to sit and stare at as a display piece. I think it's great. It definitely fit in nicely with the 20th anniversary Clone Wars sets this year, and definitely would go nice on your shelf next to any number of Clone Wars sets, including maybe the ATT build from last year. I think is a good combo to have. Oh, and lastly, it was really cool on this one that the rangefinder could flip down. Now next we have the Phase 1 Commander Cody. The mouth a bit larger and definitely better looking on this one than I think on the Rex. The Phase 1 design with that orange fin and orange visor definitely looks really good. I think the orange really pops on this build. You have the nicely attached antenna, and then kind of the sides of this helmet. It's interesting the way the build works. They aren't straight like they were on the Rex. They actually bow out at a slight angle, so I think the build technique for that is pretty cool. But overall, two very nice Clone Wars helmets coming back to back at 10 and 9. Moving on to number 8, we see our first of 3 Ahsoka show sets for 2023. So if you haven't figured out, all 3 of them are making the top 8 here. First up with Ahsoka's T6 Jedi shuttle. The top side of this thing is fantastic. The build looks great. It's $80, which like might feel like too much, but I also feel like is fair in today's LEGO market. I don't know. Overall, the build looks good. It has good play functionality. It's got the turret built onto the back. It's got the little door on the like top fin there with a sticker on the circular piece. The windshield cockpit piece is printed. That's great. Looks great. Nicely integrated. And you can only fit one figure in there, which I saw some people complain about, but like that's not something that I think is a flaw with this set personally. What is definitely a flaw with this set is the bottom side of the fin, and it looks pretty atrocious on one side, like really, really bad. However, because of the way that you would display this thing on its landing gear, most collectors will just never see the bottom of the thing. And so I don't see it as a huge downside that the bottom side looks as rough as it does. But it definitely does look rough, and I can understand where you're coming from if you hate it. Now, also in this set are 4 really good minifigures. First up, the only bad guy in the set, the Inquisitor Marok, includes a brand new helmet and shoulder pad mold. 2 brand new pieces for this character that was pretty quickly offed in the Ahsoka show, but still fantastic to see LEGO cares about detail with certain characters, and they definitely deliver on this one. We also get the brand new Ahsoka. Ahsoka looks really great with the arm printing, very detailed overall. Brand new Leku piece that has a great print on it. Just everything looks fantastic about this particular figure. We have the brand new Sabine from the Ahsoka show, which has a nice hairpiece, but I think looks optimal with the helmet on. Overall, just nice to have the option regardless. And then we have Professor Hu Yang, which arguably could have been a droid body, but having the minifigure body definitely adds more ability to have detail with the print. So I do appreciate it for that. And of course, you do have a unique head for him that looks great. So overall, 4 great minifigures with a really, really good build ends up at number 8 on the list. Now moving on to number 7, we have the New Republic E-Wing versus Shin Hades Starfighter. This one is $110, and I think it's a fantastic value. It's another really good example of 5 figures for $110 versus the 5 figures in the gunship for $140 being inexcusable. But the 5 figures in this set, we'll just talk about them first, are very, very good. We have a really good representation of Morgan Elsbeth. We also have Shin Hades, which I love the hairpiece on. I think they really nailed the look of her face, kind of that distressed gothy look, I would say. And then we have a really nice Balin Skull as well. Loved him in the show and certainly loved the LEGO minifigure that they made for this. We have the IKEA Astromech droid and finally Captain Porter. So I think across the board, you just have 5 really good minifigures. Like there's just nothing wrong with any of them. Now, the 2 ships included in this set don't really see each other in the Ahsoka show. And so I could definitely see that as a downside, but if you think of this as more of just a 2-in-1 pack and not necessarily like a let's make an accurate dogfight from the show pack, that's great. Although that was probably the intention, was that these 2 would fight in the show, and that's why LEGO made it like this, is they probably thought they were going to because they were making this based off concept art, but then when the show came out, they didn't. Stuff like that happens, and when it's based on new media like this, it's really easy to forgive. But the E-Wing, this is the second version of the E-Wing that we've had. It's just great. It just is. It's so good looking. The color scheme is good. It's got good play features that don't distract from the look. You just have some stud shooters that are built onto the side at the bottom that are just kind of hidden under the wings almost. You have really great landing gear. You have really cool looking engines with that pink thrust coming out of the back. The cockpit area is phenomenal. Inside of there, there's actually an extra little compartment where you can hide Captain Porter's blaster. That's great. Now, as we look to Shin Hades Starfighter, it's got some different elements from different Star Wars vehicles that we've seen over the years. It feels a little bit like a Naboo Starfighter. It feels a little bit like General Grievous's Starfighter. It feels a little bit like some World War II airplanes, and I think that was kind of the idea in the show. Like, it definitely has elements of different things that make it really cool. The color scheme is great. It's got a bit of a distressed look with some of the stickers with kind of the paint peeling off, and you again had nicely integrated play functions with the stud shooters. You had the ability to put a lightsaber behind the cockpit, and there was even another hidden compartment underneath that one. So I think this combo set was a fantastic value at $110, and if you liked the Ahsoka show and you want some of those iconic characters, especially Balin, this is a set to get, man. This one was amazing. Again, coming in at number 7 on the list. Moving on to number 6, the UCS Venator. I can't believe this set exists. It's beyond incredible to be able to have this in my collection. I think the build looks fantastic. I think having Captain Rex and Admiral Yularen is great, although the Captain Rex is definitely not as good as it could and should have been for a $650 UCS set. Regardless, this Venator brought back that printed UCS plaque, which was great, and then we had the 20th anniversary Clone Wars brick, which is exclusive to this UCS Venator because they didn't include that brick in any of the other 20th anniversary Clone Wars sets. The stability of this UCS Venator model is something to note. It's so good. It's so strong. Compared to the UCS Star Destroyer from 2019, they made so many improvements for something that you would think would be so similar, but it's really not. It's completely different as far as the build and the skeleton goes. They really improved it in a lot of ways and made it so strong, so sturdy, so easy to pick up. Another thing this set did really well was handle the sag on the engines. It was something that I was really worried about, but ultimately just isn't that big of a deal, as it was designed well enough to hold them up in a straight enough position for it not to be distracting, and certainly should age pretty well, so that was good. I think the set also would have been better off without that micro scale gunship that was included. It looks pretty dang ugly on the side of the Venator, and it's something that I think if you want the optimal display look, you would just take off, but I'm obviously judging the sets as they are released, not as you could modify them. I think the low effort Captain Rex minifigure combined with this Venator not being kind of the standard Revenge of the Sith design, which is just more aesthetically pleasing to me, is what's really holding this set back. Those two aspects, if you change those things, I think you have a perfect UCS Venator. And not to say that this version of the Venator isn't good. It's certainly accurate to what it's supposed to be. It's just not what I find to be the most aesthetically pleasing of the Venator styles. But regardless, it's still fantastic to have a UCS Venator. A lot of people love this set, and rightfully so, including myself. It doesn't mean it's flawless though. Cracking our top 5 is the TIE Bomber, a set that LEGO hadn't made for 20 years, but was absolutely worth the wait as they made an incredible new version. It was basically the same size as the 2003 TIE Bomber, but everything was better. Well, almost everything. This one didn't have the big mega missile, which was really cool for the 2003 one, but otherwise everything was better about this new TIE Bomber. Now, I did find it odd that they chose to call this a 40th anniversary Return of the Jedi set, as it's known for its appearance in episode 5, and the box art is clearly the episode 5 scenes, so like I don't really understand that at all. I guess they think slapping that on there sells an extra box or two, but moving on, we had some great functionality on the actual TIE Bomber with the bombing function. You had 4 flick-fire missiles that you push down on from above to make them drop out. You also had a couple of stud shooters in the middle section of the TIE Bomber. To the right of that, there's a really nice printed panel with some very nice accurate detailing, and then of course you had the cockpit, which feels small. Most TIE Fighter cockpit windscreen pieces are larger, but this is accurately small. It's actually got a very large gray bezel with the smaller windscreen piece used in the middle. Inside the cockpit was definitely a bit tight, but it gets the job done and has just enough room for the included TIE pilot. Alongside him, you had Vice Admiral Sloane, nice minifigure, unique character inclusion. Definitely cool to see LEGO do some outside of the box stuff for LEGO Star Wars minifigures, but I think it's another great reason to not call this a Return of the Jedi anniversary set. She wasn't in the movie. At number 4, we have the $100 Emperor's Throne Room diorama. It had 807 pieces. Definitely feels a little overpriced, but I think this set looks so good as an 18+ display piece. It has another one of those 40th anniversary Return of the Jedi bricks. It's got another different quote tile, and with this one, you got 3 minifigs. Darth Vader, of course, Emperor Palpatine, but most excitingly, I think the Luke Skywalker in this set saw a brand new hairpiece that is much more accurate to his appearance in Return of the Jedi, although I would argue that the hairpiece is a bit tall on him. It does look a little bit goofy from certain angles. Anyway, the overall design of this thing is just beautiful. You had a very nice printed windscreen piece behind the Emperor with a really good design of window pieces clipped onto one of those kind of round bendable pieces. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just a great build. It's very accurate to what we saw in Return of the Jedi, and it just helps you recreate one of those iconic scenes for your Star Wars display. I honestly don't have too much to say about it. I just think it's really, really good. At number 3, we have the Mandalorian Fangfighter versus TIE Interceptor. Now, this is another 2-in-1 set. This one costs $100 with 957 pieces, so a bit cheaper than the other 2-in-1 that we saw this year. In this one, like the Ahsoka set, depicted a battle that never occurred. The Mandalorian Fangfighter never took on the TIE Interceptors in The Mandalorian Season 3, so that definitely disappointed some people, but again, if you can separate that, I definitely am more forgiving again, because this was certainly made based on concept art. I think it's a great way to get 2 ships for one price. You get 4 really good minifigures here with the Mandalorian Fleet Commander, the TIE Pilot, and R2-E6. It's one of the few good Imperial astromech droids in my eyes. It's rare that I get an Imperial astromech droid and think it's cool, but I thought this one was cool. This set also introduced the Darksaber for the first time. I don't like the Darksaber, but it did introduce it for the first time for those that do and are excited about it. Now, the Fang Fighter was really only seen faintly in the background of the show, but as far as I could tell, it's pretty dang accurate to what we could see. But like outside of that, there's not much to say. It just is a fun little playset model that's very flyable and seemingly accurate to what we saw on the show. The TIE Interceptor, however, we did get much better looks at and had obviously seen in other Star Wars media like Return of the Jedi. And the TIE Interceptor we hadn't really seen since 2006, so it was great to see how much of an upgrade this was. It looks so good in the light gray color scheme compared to the black and blue of old, and it's got so many fantastic, accurate details. That printed windscreen piece continues to go hard on these TIE fighters, and I would say while this set doesn't have anything that's particularly flashy or unexpected, it just does everything really well. Other than maybe the Darksaber, but like it's just a really good 2-in-1 set. So I think it's one of the best sets of 2023. At number 2, we have a set that I could easily see myself flipping with number 1, but we have the midi scale Super Star Destroyer. Now the midi scale lineup is one of my favorite sublines of LEGO Star Wars, and LEGO has brought it back at the right time in the 18+ lineup. They created it in 2009, 2010. It was kind of ahead of its time for LEGO Star Wars, and I had always kind of looked at it that way. Finally, in 2020, they released the Nebulon B Frigate midi scale set as a Comic-Con one, and now we're seeing it really come back into the limelight with this 18+ Executor, and it looks gorgeous. I think this is how they should do some of these capital ships. Otherwise, you have to pay like $500 for a UCS Super Star Destroyer to have any representation of a Super Star Destroyer in your collection. So I think being able to have that for $70 is a really underrated aspect of midi scale. I think it's fantastic. We have a couple of smaller Star Destroyers flanking it on the left and the right. A beautiful build, I can't say that enough, for the actual Super Star Destroyer with tons of details, including the bridge. And then inside of this, there's a really neat Easter egg of the bounty hunter meeting from The Empire Strikes Back, just using studs to represent the bounty hunters seen in that scene. But I love this set. I mean, this is what an adult collectible LEGO Star Wars set should be. It is so flawless to me. Like what would you improve about this, you know? Possibly putting a minifigure on the right, I guess, but like I think the Super Star Destroyer, and for what midi scale has established itself to be, is great. I think this is like a 10 out of 10 set, and I really hope LEGO Star Wars continues down this path, because I think it's really good to have an affordable option of some of these LEGO Star Wars capital ships, as I mentioned, but also size. Size is a problem for LEGO collectors, and I think offering something that doesn't take up 5 feet on a table, something that can like literally just fit on a shelf or a desk, is such a good option to be able to have for people. So even if LEGO does release a UCS Super Star Destroyer next year or whatever, like having both is great. Now, what I think is the best set of 2023 for LEGO Star Wars is the Ghost and Phantom 2. This is another one kind of like the gunship, where people have been asking for this for quite a few years now, and unlike the gunship, I think everyone is pretty universally happy with the way the Ghost and Phantom 2 turned out. We'll start with the minifigs. Lieutenant Beta and First Officer Hawkins to me are kind of just random throw-ins. They're nice, they're accurate, they look good from the show, but I just don't really care about them. They weren't like big pieces from the show. Of course, Chopper was a really good inclusion here. Then we have Jason Syndulla, who frankly should have had green hair and doesn't in the set. Still don't know why. It's an easy error that you could chop up to concept art. However, we know Jason has green hair from Rebels, so I kind of find it inexcusable. He should just have green hair, kind of like how Rey earlier should have just had a yellow lightsaber. It's kind of simple stuff like that. But lastly, we have the Hera Syndulla figure, who is really, really good in this set. They did a good job representing her and all of the details with her jacket and even on her headpiece, like the little goggles on there. It looks great. So I think 5 pretty good minifigs across the board, although it doesn't have like the big names maybe that you were looking for outside of Hera and Chopper. Now, getting into the build for this thing by looking at the box art, I just want to say that I think the box art is part of the reason I picked this set as number 1. It's just so beautiful. All of the colors go so well together. I just had to put it out there. But we had the Phantom 2 included with this one, and I think that really put this set over the top. With the 2014 Ghost, it was sold separately from the Phantom 1 and eventually the Phantom 2 in 2017. But having this one be both sets in one makes it both a better playset and a better display set, as kids can have the ships interact, and people that want to display it don't have to display the Ghost with a gaping hole on the back of the Ghost, and that goes a long way in both aspects. Now, the Phantom 2 is a little bit small, and it kind of lacks a little bit of detail because of that, but within the scale of the Ghost here, like, I think it's perfect, and they do include an adequate amount of detail to me personally. You might not be able to fit the whole Chopper minifigure in there, but you dang sure can take his head off, much like we did back in the early days of LEGO Star Wars, looking at you, I don't know, 2006 V-Wing, and place his head on the side of that Phantom. It's certainly not the reason they did it, but it definitely feels like a throwback to those early 2000s LEGO Star Wars days to me. Now, the Ghost had pretty good looking landing gear. It had spring-loaded shooters that were able to be activated by pushing on one of the turrets underneath the main cockpit of the Ghost on the front. It's nice that the bubble windscreen piece on front is printed, but I definitely found it quite disappointing that they only used a sticker for the other cockpit piece where Hera was. Definitely should have been printed like it was on the T6 shuttle. Now, the ramp is supposed to be on the front of the Ghost, but given size constraints, it just can't happen, I think, unless they make a UCS Ghost, but they did still go ahead and include a ramp on either side of the Ghost. The interior of the Ghost was also jam-packed with tons of small details, as well as little specific areas for different characters to be able to stand, like a little control panel for Jason, a specific spot for Chopper's body to go, especially when his head is on top of the Phantom 2. And all of that interior space is very easy to access, as you can remove the entire top section of the Ghost. They did have to remove the rotatable turret on top to be able to achieve this, but overall I think that was a worthwhile compromise, as the look of this thing is just so good. I think one of the things that goes a long way on this model compared to the 2014 model is that little side paneling where it's got the inverted plates. It's such a simple detail, but really does tie the model together. So those are my rankings for every LEGO Star Wars 2023 set from worst to first. I think this was clearly a year of LEGO meeting some of the long-standing fan demands with a new gunship, a UCS Venator, some Clone Trooper helmet display sets, the MIDI scale coming back, and of course that Ghost and Phantom 2 set. Now, they're certainly not batting 1,000 when it comes to the execution on some of these things. I wish they would have better interaction with the fan community to get a better idea of what's right and what's wrong, because there are some pretty easy things they could do that would make some of these sets so much better. But anyway, in retrospect, I think 2023 was a pretty good year for LEGO Star Wars. There were a lot of very good builds, and I think that's a point that we have found ourselves at as LEGO Star Wars fans. We are consistently getting very, very good, accurate builds. I still think the minifigures have a way to go to reach the quality that I would expect out of them in 2024 and beyond, but overall, 2023 was a pretty good year, and I think a lot of fans were very excited with some of the sets that came out this year. So let me know what you think down in the comments section below of LEGO Star Wars sets in 2023. If you enjoyed this very long worst to first, hit that like button, and if you want to check out any of my 2023 set reviews in full to get a better idea of my opinions on each of the set, you can do so with the playlist on the end screen now.